Right, right.
So it's kind of like parallel with Genesis, the counting Genesis, but it's actually referring to Revelation.
It's like it's recapping of the Old Testament.
It's almost like a recapping. It's not a parallel because him being cast out is a one-time event. He's not cast out and then he's cast out again.
It's just more information.
Right, right. It's what we would call progressive revelation. Does that make sense? So he's basically given an account of what has already happened, and he's tying it in with what's currently going on. That's not unusual. In fact, like in, I believe, Jude, not Jude, but what does it talk about? Talks about the, gosh, I'm frozen in my mind, but there are times when there's like a double, not like a revelation that expresses itself in the current context and the future context also.
That's like watching a movie that's showing you something now, but they'll take you back and show you scenes of how you got to this scene right now.
Right, that's a good way of putting it. Did y'all hear that?
Yeah.
He said it's like watching a movie where they'll show you the scene at the end of the movie, but they'll show you a little clip of it at the beginning. You see the clip in the early part of the movie and it doesn't make much sense, but when you get to the end, then you can see, oh, that happened back there, and that's why we're where we are. That's a good way of putting it. A good way of putting it. All right, let me move on. Yes?
In Job, when Satan could go back and forth to heaven, when was he doing that?
That was the same time. And so prior to, well, I think that was after he was thrown out. That was after. But, and we talked about this before also, even though he was thrown out, he still had access. Just as he does now.
That's right.
Just as he does now. We also talked about Job chronologically. The book of Job happened during the same time as Genesis. Chronologically. The book of Job happened the same time that Genesis happened. So the mindset in the book of Job is from his friends when they don't quite understand why so much bad stuff is happening to Job, because at that time the predominant thought was if you do good, God is going to do what? He's going to bless you, and if you don't, he's going to curse you. So when all of this stuff is happening to Job, it's very logical for them to think, Job, what did you do? And if you read the book of Job, you see that question. They're asking Job, well, you had to have done something. Why don't you just tell us what you did, right? And so, but that's not the case. The book of Job really talks about the sovereignty of God. That makes sense? All right. So, verse 12, it says this. They did not love their life even when faced with death. For this reason, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. Okay? Satan, his reign on earth, and is he the ruler of the earth right now? Yes, still is. He's the ruler of the earth. Okay? But he only has a short period of time. He knows the end. He knows his end destination. And so while he does what he does, he is going to try to take down as many followers of Christ as he can. And he's not trying to just wound you. He's trying to kill you. And your family. We see the impact of what he's doing. I mean, It's normal now for us to have school shootings. 18 this year. You imagine? 15 years ago, we'd have said 15 years ago, there's going to be 18 school shootings. You said, man, get out of here. But now it's normal. Listen, somebody called the police and slaughtered them. That's where we're living. And we're not even in the tribulation period. If y'all don't see the signs and the urgency that's needed to tell people about Christ. And here's the thing, listen, all these word of faith preachers, it is not going to get better. It's not. You gotta speak stuff into the atmosphere. Listen, you speak all you want into the atmosphere. It's going to get worse. I'm being very honest. That's the new thing now. You gotta shift the atmosphere as if your words can, I have no idea where they're finding it. Yeah, that's right, from somebody's song. They come up with their theology from somebody's song. And so, listen, it's going to get worse. Now, he continues on in verse 13, he says, and when the dragon, who is who? Satan, saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted who? Israel, the woman. He persecuted the woman. He hates Israel. Satan hates Israel. From the very beginning. Listen, Israel is just a little dot on the map, and yet God has preserved Israel. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child, but the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman. The woman is who? So that she could fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time and a half a time. That's how long? 3.5 years. There's God's protection once again. But 3.5 years from the presence of the serpent. Now the serpent, it goes to make war with the woman to deceive the nation, but God is going to protect Israel. And it says, verse 15, and the serpent poured water like river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. And so the thought is that the serpent was going to try to drown the children of Israel. This protection that they're getting, in my mind, kind of is like they have somewhat of a barrier around them. It's almost like a bowl in my mind. I don't know if this is a reality, but if there was a flood, then they will all be drowned in this little bowl type area. Maybe the valley, if you go look at a valley or something like that. But for whatever reason, the serpent, it says that he poured water like river out of his mouth, and he wants this woman. And it says, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. Verse 16, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of his mouth. So God protected Israel. Okay? So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children. I can't get her. I'm going to get her offspring. It says the rest of her children who do what? That's one of the evidences that you are a part of God's kingdom, is that you do what? That you keep his commandments. Listen, we are no longer under a law, but we are under grace, but should we obey his commandments? Absolutely. Absolutely. The summary of the law and the prophets is what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your strength and your mind, and love your neighbor. Jesus summarized the law and the prophets in those two commandments. He says, so the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. It's not going to be easy to hold to the testimony of Jesus, but we're reminded early on they have overcome how? By the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They did not value their lives. In other words, they were willing to die for the testimony of Jesus Christ. What about you? Are you willing to die for the testimony of Jesus Christ? Today, we won't be in the tribulation period. Chapter 13, verse 1. And the dragon, who was who? Satan. He stood on the sand of the seashore. He says, then I saw a beast coming out of the sea. Got another character that enters into this scene. This beast, we'll see, has some qualities. Well, I think I shared on last week who this beast was. And let me just read a few of the verses and then I'll go back. It says, I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. The sea probably referring to either the nations or the underworld, I guess you could say the abyss. I saw a beast coming out of the sea, having 10 horns. And remember what we said horns are referring to? Did we talk about horns? Yeah. Horns are what? Rulers. Very good. And it says in 7 heads. The heads are referring to what? Nations. And his horns were, on his horns were 10 diadems, speaking of authority, and on his heads were blasphemous names. Now we're referring to right here in verse 1, who? The beast. The red dragon, the dragon is referred to as who? Satan. We got a new character here. Then I saw a beast coming out of the sea. This beast is the Antichrist. Okay? Verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like a leopard, in the sense that leopards are swift. One of the commentators said that it's like a leopard in the sense that they have black and brown and white, all are in the skin color of a leopard. I don't know if I agree with that. I just think that it's probably referring to the alluring swiftness of this beast. Right. Right. Yeah, that could be that it blends in because it's alluring and it's swift. But this beast, it says, I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear. The bear, metaphorical, speaking to the Medo-Persian Empire. I'll talk about that perhaps here in a minute, or maybe on next week. But this bear is really speaking of the ferocious strength combined with a great stability. Again, this beast, the Antichrist, is leopard-like in its swiftness. It is like a bear in its ferocity, ferocious strength, and combined with great stability. And then it says in its mouth like the mouth of a lion. Like the mouth of a lion. The lion is used metaphorically for a fierce, all-consuming power as they extend their domain. Now, the leopard, the bear, and the lion all are referring to three nations. The leopard refers to Greece. The bear is referring to Medo-Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire, and the lion speaking of the Babylonian Empire.
What did you say that again?
The leopard metaphorically is referring to the Greeks. The bear is referring to Medo-Persian Empire, Medo-Persian Empire, and the lion metaphorically looking at the Babylonian Empire. Now, it goes on to say, and the